everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for taking the time to come here. I worked on this book for 8 to 10 years. I was not planning on writing a book. I was becoming an American, and I just wanted to learn, American history. And so I discovered so many facts, and I was like, this is crazy. And so I needed a pastime or something different, just to keep myself entertained. And so I decided to write, and I wrote one short story and another one and another one. And the more I dug and the more I discovered shocking, events. And so I decided to write this book. I'm gonna forward. So I decided, there was 2 things I decided I was going to do. One, I practiced for this class and for this presentation, and I'm going to open it. So as I speak, if you have any question, please stop me, because this is more for you to hear about what I discovered as I went through, my studies of American history. My background is in the visual arts. I'm a commercial photographer, and I taught photography for like 30 years. I stopped during COVID, the school closed, so I went on and do other things. And one of the things I did is write this book. I write under the name Adrien Gold, and this is in honor of my father, who always had some stories to tell from the part of France he was from, and he loved this story. And what he loved most was what we call in France la petite histoire, the small story, the story behind the big story. The Federal Reserve, big story. What happened below? And so when I started studying, this is kind of what I looked into, la petite histoire, or the little story behind the big story. Okay, I'm sorry. So there are so many quotes that I use in this book, and when I sent it to the Library of Congress, they said, well, this is great, but you have a lot of quotes of people, and quotes like this by President Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, who really regretted getting roped into setting up the Federal Reserve, which we'll talk at length a little bit further. So I have a few quotes. This is from the Rothschild brother. So basically, this book is it's called The Kings Have Won, and basically it's an examination of America's path to oligarchy. And from the first chapter all the way to the end, I cover that story of becoming an oligarchy through facts. And I'll go through the chapter a little bit, because otherwise, if I go into very detailed explanation, and I can if you want, but it gets complicated. So it's basically the Rothschild is like, whoever understands this system, which at one point, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Yes.
Can you read it just because I can't see it?
Yes. So the Rothschild sent a message to their team in New York City. And they're talking about the system of central banks that they set up. And they set it up all over the world. It says, the few who understand the system will either be so interested in their profit, also dependent on its favor, that they will have no opposition to what we're doing from that class. While, on the other hand, the great body of people, mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantage that capital derives from the system, will bear its burden without complaint. So that's us. And honestly, I was trying to think what is the most shocking things that I learned. And basically I would have to say, well, which period? Because there are so many. So I'm going to move to the next one. So this is another one. And so this is from Sir Josiah Stamp. He was a president of the Bank of England and the second richest man in Britain in the 1920s. Okay, so this is not someone, you know, who's into conspiracy theories. This is a banker. And he says, the modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. Paper money, this is what we have. If you want to continue to be the slave of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, then let bankers continue to create money and control credit. Now, one of before we go further, I'm going to just briefly explain central banks. Now, central banks are all over the world, okay? In 1913, Woodrow Wilson was convinced to pass the Federal Reserve Act, which was the third Federal Reserve Bank in America. And we'll talk about the other one in a minute. There was a fourth one, which was the Bank of America, but really was not set up properly and it didn't do anything. The function of a central bank, so our central bank, first of all, they are private entities. So the Federal Reserve, which is very, very, very formal, we think the Federal Reserve is federal. It isn't. It has no reserve, so there's no gold against the amount of money they print. And their functions are, one, to issue currency. So the Federal Reserve Bank, a member bank, needs money. They get the money from the central bank, the Federal Reserve. They control the interest rate. So right now we're paying only in the interest on America's debt, the only interest, okay? On a yearly basis, we spend, America, all of us, the one who don't understand the system, we pay $1 trillion, okay? And, you know, of course, you can find all this information. You have to dig a little bit because they're very, very good at, you know, keeping things under wrap. So and right now, our current president wants, you know, the chairman of the Federal Reserve to lower interest, not so much for our benefit, it's so that the debt gets a little lower because the interests are so high, they pay so much money. The Federal Reserve will tell you they are a branch of the government. Not true. The Federal Reserve in America, okay, maybe different in other places, the Federal Reserve is a system of 12 central banks. There's one in Boston, St. Louis. The most powerful is the New York Central Bank, okay? And so they'll tell you, well, we're a branch, but they do have shareholders. So how can they have shareholders but be part of the government? They also own roughly 30 to 45% of America's debt. How can an entity that is part of the government own that much money of its own debt? Because it's different. So we pay $1 trillion in yearly interest. And okay, so basically it's an exploration, and I'll go over each chapter so you can see my process and which story. But we've been warned, which is I think the most worrisome. In the last story called Monarchies in the 21st Century, I have quotes by Obama, Bernie Sanders, Republican, everyone. We have been warned. It's just, life is busy. We're surviving. And so, but he said it on Oprah. We're an oligarchy. We're no longer a democracy. There is on a brief aside, there is the economic, there's a magazine, very famous magazine that rates each country in terms of democracy, and we're basically not a failed democracy, but on the edge. And the reason why mainly is the gerrymandering and also the lobbyists, the voice that, you can think of something you would want. For instance, and I don't want to get political, but abortion, 80% of Americans think abortion should be legal. Well, it's not. How come? So, and in the last chapter, I have a research done by people in Princeton about how our voice, our, desire, are really rarely the voice that's being passed. So if a law, and I'll be talking about this, if a law, 90% of Americans want that law to pass, but 1% doesn't want, and they're the one with the finances and the lobbyists, that law will won't pass. Okay. So, as I said earlier, I became an American. I wanted to study American history, and for some reason I was led to the wrong corner of the bookstore, the one that says "You're crazy." The first book I read was Jesse Ventura, the governor of Washington, the wrestler, and I learned about Smedley Darlington Butler. So these are kind of like the shocking thing. And Smedley Darlington Butler, between the 30s and 40s, was one of the most decorated generals. And he kind of retired. He wrote a book called War is a Racket. Fascinating character. He was a Quaker. He was a Quaker, and at 16 he said, I want to be in the army, and left his home and became one of the biggest. He had a lot of nicknames, but really, and he was approached by very rich people. They didn't really went to him, they sent somebody, and they said, we need you to raise an army, and we're going to take over FDR. And we want to make him, he's too old, he's important, he can't really do much, and we have a person in charge of the government. And he reported it to, so this, I wrote a story about this. He reported it to the congressman, which they ended up, I don't know if you remember, there was a McCormack, they did a survey, and basically all this got put away and no one ever talked about it. But, the DuPont, the Rothschild, the Rockefeller, all these people were kind of behind. There was a huge amount of money behind this. So I discovered first at the bank war. The first story I wrote, I think, was Smedley Darlington Butler. I like the character. And I was, at the time, not planning to write a book, so I was just playing with short stories. Then I discovered the Federal Reserve was not quite federal. Then Hamilton. Who thinks Hamilton was great for America? There's no wrong answer. Nobody, just checking. Well, he was great. What was the question again? The question is, do you think Alexander Hamilton was great? Oh, I'm sorry. See, I'm not going to read again. I'm going to play because I paid for a very expensive actor, and he has a beautiful voice, perfect English, not like me. So he'll be the one talking. But Do you think Alexander Hamilton was great for this country?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In what way?
He wanted a strong central government.
Yes.
That
Yes.
was the main reason. I think
Yes.
he
Yeah.
was good.
Does anyone think he?
And of course, he was a banker as well.
Yeah.
He wanted a king. He wanted George Washington to be.
So that was like on the side that. See, I think one of the things I discovered that I really love about writing and creating characters, because this book is not like it's really fiction. So you're going to hear about, let's say, the Federal Reserve, but there's a love story, and you get to know the characters. And so it's not as dry, because I read a lot, like the Bank War right now. So Bank War was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson decided that the central bank at the time was a scam, that they were taking too much money, that they were profiting way too much. And at the time, most of the central banks were run by the Rothschild in England, and he didn't like that. And so it was a battle, the bank war, between he and the director of the the central bank at the time, Nicholas Biddle. It's an amazing story because Nicholas Biddle was absolutely brilliant. I mean, really like a brilliant character. He graduated, I think, at 11 from college, but it was like, you're too young. So he was so upset he went somewhere else and graduated cum laude. He was at 14, became traveled the world, you know, all that stuff. And then he didn't really want to be the director of the central bank, but he did it, and it ruined him. I mean, it really ruined him, and the bank war also ruined him, and he died miserably. It's a great story. I love the character. I feel bad for Nicholas Biddle, but I like the duality. We were talking about Alexander Hamilton, and Alexander Hamilton, I call him the builder of nations, because everybody else were clueless. I mean, Jefferson, I think, was fantastic, and the more I read about Jefferson, the more I'm kind of amazed. But everything that happened is because of Hamilton. He was so brilliant. For instance, I don't know if you've ever gone to Paterson, New Jersey. Paterson, New Jersey is, you know, there's nothing. But he's the one who created this city, saying, we need manufacturing in America, stole the information from the English, brought them back to America, and then he built this entire city, where they built an entire industry of manufacturing and so on. But I love the duality, and all my characters have the duality, the good and the bad, you know. And I find for Hamilton that this was very much the case. The writing process, I mean, I'm not a writer, I don't know, but I had fun. And what happened is there was some magic that, I mean, we all know at our young age that when something's meant to happen, it's meant to happen. And I look for a group where I could, you know, maybe share or learn about writing. And the group was fantastic. They were very encouraging, and they kept pushing me and pushing me. Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I think the problem is we all think everything should be black and white. So we've been watching a lot of the biographies on Stories, which is like a history channel.
Mhm.
Recently, they did Hamilton and Burr,
Mhm.
and how it led to, you know, his
Yeah.
demise.
Yeah, I mean,
It's so far more complicated.
very complicated.
Hamilton was great. Burr was awful. This one was supposed to be vice president, and then this. And at the bottom line of the whole thing, I say, thanks for playing.
Yes.
That's it. You never know how it's going to turn
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Because you can decide pros and cons to everybody that's in history.
Exactly. And I think in the end, you make up your own mind to how you feel. Burr and Hamilton, actually, if you know the Bank of New York, which is in New York, they funded it. They tried to do a central bank in New York, but Hamilton had a fight with Schuyler. I don't know if you know upstate New York, there's a town called Schuyler. Well, the Schuyler he was a senator and he didn't like Hamilton too much or something. Or maybe it's not Schuyler because he was married to his daughter. Anyway, the senator didn't like him, so he pushed, and both Hamilton and Burr had shares in that Bank of New York. So yeah,
They also go into the personalities of each of these characters in history, which is even fascinating.
fascinating.
Why did Burr let Hamilton get away with something and ignore him, and then later on not ignore him?
Yes.
It's so
It's
fascinating.
fascinating. It's incredible. I mean, I'm sure you all have read or you know about the book by Ron Chernow, Hamilton. That's a book that inspired the play. Fantastic, really amazing. We'll get to Hamilton when I talk about each chapter. So the surprise, the discovery, the research was enormous because each story was a little crazy on my part because I would take a story, kind of like dig in, find a little part that would lead me to build the story how I wanted. For instance, Hamilton. I didn't want to write a book on Hamilton. You just go get Chernow and you read the book and you're like, I got everything I need. But I wanted to write a short story that encompasses an entire life, but question the right, the wrong, which part is good, which part isn't. The writing, was painful, but in the end, the group was fantastic and they helped me a lot. The book covers 200 years of American history. We start with Hamilton, then we go through Madison and the War of 1812. Then I go I'll get into this, but we'll go all the way to after the 2008 crisis, and then I have a closing chapter that question kind of the system we're in. Let's keep going. Okay, so I'm going to take my notes, and please stop me because I think I try not to make it first too complicated and too, so that we can have a conversation and you can raise your hand anytime. So the first story is about Hamilton and about the steps he took, and I was trying to figure out, it took me like almost 8 months to figure out how can I tell the story of Hamilton in a short story and put as much information as possible. It was very, very tricky. And so the way I went about it is I started with the end when he shot, and then we went back all the way, and then so on. The story is fantastic. It covers a lot of stuff, a lot of the event, and that he was involved with. Really, really, I like it. The second one is about the Bank War. Not the Bank War. The War of 1812. Now, I didn't know anything about the War of 1812. I didn't know that the British burnt Washington down. I didn't know that. I didn't know that the White House, all that stuff. And then there was a hurricane, and everything that had been on fire got soaked and completely ruined. But the way I looked at that story is what happened before and what happened after. What are the changes? Why is this war? And a lot of the historians, which I'm not, but I like to read and study this stuff. A lot of the historians says this was a foolish war. There was no reason. Well, here is what happened in my book. So, in 1791, Alexander Hamilton said, we need a central bank. Create a central bank. It's called the first bank of the United States. The bank has a 20-year charter. Now we got to 1811, and 1811, Madison, who does not like Hamilton, decides, I'm not going to renew the charter. So the Rothschild were And all the investors lost their money. And they were very upset. And the Rothschild said flat out, either they get me back a central bank, or they're going to be in real trouble. And the War of 1812 happened. The war ended, okay? There was no changes in land stolen, anything. What happened is the war ended up in 1814. In 1816, a new central bank, the second bank of the United States. And I think that's a fantastic story. I decided, initially I started with when I first published my book, I started with this story, the fourth story about the Rothschild. But then I decided, well, I'm going to try to do it chronologically and start with Hamilton. And so we get to, the next four stories cover the Rothschild. The Rothschild were very good people. I mean, I read contemporary, biography of these. They were very nice people. But if you wanted money, they would take your money. And then they started doing the central bank and so on. Anyway, so I figured out that there were four rules that they followed. One, they wanted to make sure that they had knowledge. They wanted, because knowledge is power, as you all know. They wanted to, they were very good at deceit. So using that knowledge, they could actually change the events because they knew more than whoever they were dealing with. The third thing was that they implemented an entire central bank. So let me just go. So we know that the central bank issues money, okay? So right now, okay, and I'm going to talk current so it makes sense to you. The central bank, let's say, needs $1 billion, okay, in currency that they're going to put in the market. They go to the treasury, they pay for the paper, the ink, the printing, which is around, I think, and there's so much information, but I think, let's say 20 cents. So they pay 20 cents for each dollar, and they have this money, and now they can distribute it. Now, if it becomes debt, and they got 1 billion, they paid 20% for the printing of the money. But now we, the American, who don't really understand this system, we owe $1 billion is added to the debt. If you look at the debt chart, have you ever looked at that? So there's a chart. A very wealthy man in New York City decided, you know what, I'm going to create a chart. And it basically shows you the current national debt and also what each and every one of us owe against, as as American against. And it's, I think you owe probably like each individual owe like $175,000. Just yeah. So check it out online. American the clock. Okay, so those four stories, I wrote them differently, different point of views, which has been the feedback I get. Sometimes it's confusing. I think if you listen on audio, I don't know if you guys like audio, but the audio is fantastic. Anyway, after that, we go to Jackson and the bank war. Really good story. It's a love story. And it's so the demise of Nicholas Biddle, which all of us, his wife was a fantastic, very kind woman. They were kind people, it's just they got caught up, in a fight with Jackson. And Andrew Jackson was not, he was obnoxious. Andrew Jackson was an orphan, went to the family that was supposed to take care of him, and they were like, get out of here. You're like, we don't want to deal with you. He was so obnoxious. Anyway, became the president, and I think he did good for the American fighting the central bank that was making so much money. If you're interested and you like his story, look online for the veto speech, Andrew Jackson's veto speech, when he vetoed because the bank had paid all the senator, and the senator said, yeah, let's keep the bank. And he was like, no, I'm not standing for this. But the veto speech is fantastic, and you feel like this was actually a good president for the people. And then we go into the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve is a very complicated system. But what I discovered are a few things. First, there was a man that really designed, he was kind of an expert in central bank, and his name is Paul Warburg. He was a banker in Germany, came to America with his wife, you know, kind of led the message of we need to have a central bank. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. Here's what happened. So, talking about La Petite Histoire, the big story, and you take the little story. So, I'm reading about the central bank and what happened and this, and it's, you know, I mean, then you go down the rabbit hole where they talk about fractional reserve banking, and you're like, whoa, what is this? You know, but what happened is when this man died, Paul Warburg, the entire family said at the funeral, well, you know, he had a broken heart. He died of a broken heart because they took away from him the reign of the central bank, and he got pushed out. And I said, no, this is not possible. This guy is brilliant. He doesn't care. You know, he did other things, you know, and I said, he had a broken heart, and I created this character. And this is a beautiful story, very, 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 and it covers everything beyond the story of Paul Warburg, and it's called the father of the Federal Bank. Did you ever hear the word Daddy Warburg? Warburg? Daddy Warburg? Warburg, yeah. Well, it's after him. It's after Daddy Paul Warburg. The Jewish Museum in New York on Fifth Avenue was donated by his brother Felix Warburg, who lived in that house, and then they said, okay, well, we'll donate to the Jewish Museum. It's very fascinating. Those little stories, they're endless, and they're so fascinating. The next story is about a gentleman called Colonel Edward Mandell House. He was not a colonel, but he liked the idea. And he was a great eminence. He was a power behind the throne. And he and Woodrow Wilson were this close until Woodrow Wilson realized that this guy is no good, and realized he was being scammed. The story is very, very nice because a lot of us, we know Woodrow Wilson, but we don't know, for instance, that 2 years before the end of his presidency, he fell. He had a heart attack. I think the stress was unbelievable. He fell, whacked his head, and didn't do anything after that. And his wife actually ran the government. And I thought, like, wow, this is amazing. It's a really good story. And I was trying to figure out how to write it, and I wrote it as a confession to us, the people of tomorrow, and what he did. We're going to the crash, and so for this, I'm gonna have my actor read, and hopefully you can hear it. It was pretty loud. I tested it, so, and I can't see.
In the early 20s, the greedy bankers noticed that Americans had trusted the market enough to place some of their savings into Liberty bonds. These bonds had been issued to finance the First World War. You have heard of the Liberty bonds? Yes, I have, she answered. A gentleman called Charles E. Mitchell of the National City Bank became one of the architects of this incredible scheme. He and a cohort of wealthy New York bankers, through their control of the newspapers, created a new idyllic image. Investing in stocks was safe. Backed by huge financial entities, Brokerage firms opened all over the country. Mitchell alone, through his various branches, sold millions of shares, totaling $650 million in value. The crash of 1929 would completely wipe away the value of these shares.
Okay. So, I mean, you know, when you start digging, this is incredible because basically there's a book called The 60 Families, Ferdinand Lundberg, a journalist, and he said there's 60 families running this country. That was in 1934. And he explained, and he went and researched. I mean, J.P. Morgan, all these people, Citibank, which was owned by the Rockefeller, all these people had huge amount of money invested in the stock market. Now, why did it crash? Now, the way that the very, very wealthy control economy is through expansion and contraction. Expansion, contraction. So this is what we're seeing right now, an expansion. I mean, the stock market's really high, it goes down, goes up, it goes down. But every loan, so you and I could go to a banker and buy a stock with a small percentage of the value. So $100, I could give maybe $10, $20, and I owe $100 in stock. Now, the stock went crazy in those years, and it went, you know, berserk. And so, but they were call loans. Now, a call loan is you, the creditor, you can decide whenever you want for me to pay you the money back. So I lend you $100, you can give me only $10 on it, but I'm going to tell you, okay, Wednesday I want my money back. And you don't give the $10, you give the $100. So now you're like, and that's why the crash was so bad, is because all the call loans, when they were started, the stock market went down, everybody called their loan in, and that's why it crashed. And so now we go to, so I'm covering a lot. There's a lot of stuff I didn't cover. This is a merciless world. This is about FDR and whether the New Deal was good or not. And I actually thought it was good, you know, because and so I was writing, and I wrote almost in parallel. So a wealthy person, and then documentarians that photograph the ghettos at the time. And so they go back and forth until they meet. And when they meet, there's this conversation. Well, FDR's New Deal is great. And the rich guy says, well, FDR's, it's a good attempt. He tries, it's very good, but it's not enough. We need a massive amount of money. And so he says, maybe if a war would happen, that would help. And so the Second World happened. The American middle class grew prosperous, and the strongest and the most, the envy of the rest of the world. And so, but I was at the end of the story, and I'm like, oh, actually, it may not actually, the New Deal was a good idea, but it was not big enough. Then I have, it's called the bank plot, where with Medley Darlington Butler. I'm going to skip this because I told you about it. Then I have a story about John Fitzgerald Kennedy. So John Fitzgerald Kennedy, so our money is, if you ever look at it, it says Federal Reserve note, okay? And it belongs to the Federal Reserve. John Fitzgerald Kennedy decided, you know what, this is not good. We need to disentangle ourselves from this. In my opinion, I am not quite sure, but because I could not, you know, they never said it. But he wrote this presidential order, and asked his Treasury secretary to start printing dollar that would be United States note instead of Federal Reserve note. And this money would be backed by silver. And he ordered the Secretary of the Treasury to print $5 billion at the time. That was in June of 1963. Now, I read a 500-page book about, maybe you read about JFK's assassination, fantastic, well, sad, but the book I read was fantastic. And he had one paragraph on this presidential order that would have taken away the power to issue money away from the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, the Federal Reserve Bank, I don't think was too happy about that. Another thing that they list in this tiny chapter is that on the morning of JFK's assassination, there was a massive short sale. Do you guys do stock market, any of you? Okay, a short sale is when you bet against, could be a stock, could be any of this, okay? So let's say you're running Apple company, and I think Apple stock, instead of being 100, which is at today, it's gonna go down to 90, I can short sell it. Well, what happened when JFK got assassinated, the stock plunged, one of the biggest plunge ever since the crash. But on Tuesday, when they're like, well, he was killed, the economy is still okay, we got a new president, there was a $500 million profit. So, and I thought, like, this is strange. Let me write a story. Let me write a story about this. This is like, I wrote 2 stories on JFK. Another one is Northwood, which I didn't put in the book. And if you have a minute and you like this and you want to leave your email, I'll send you, there's 2 stories I have, one on Robert Morris and one on JFK called Northwood. And if you ever don't want to be listed out, you can just remove yourself, okay? Okay, so we're almost done. I was like, it's a lot of work, all this research. Now we're at Nixon. So Nixon, there's something called the Nixon shock. And you know, most people, they don't really know about it. And basically what happened is, in the past, so let's say you are the French government and you have $10 million in currency and you want to get gold, because you don't need that much dollar, you would go to the Federal Reserve Bank and they give you gold. You know, not paper money, it's money against what it's worth. So, well, Nixon decided, yeah, no, we're not doing that anymore. And so, and you know, yesterday I was like, and you know, fractional reserve banking, and they don't need this and this. No, but it was like, no, I'm not going to do that to you. But basically, now they can print a banknote, and it's just, you know, against nothing. And so, I mean, the Federal Reserve, hallelujah, and you can see our debt. I mean, in this story, the husband works at the Federal Reserve and he works at JP Morgan, but the wife, she's like, he's a little crazy, but maybe he's right. And she starts writing down the debt. And, you know, you see like in the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000, and the debt grows. I mean, now we're like 36 trillion. I mean, it's insane. I mean, and it's, I mean, if we run our home like this, we'd be in deep trouble. Anyway, so now we're dealing with paper money, which was very good for the Federal Reserve, which is a private entity. Okay. The next 3 chapters, and it's 3 chapters for the simple reason it's extremely complicated. It's the 2008 crisis. And I wrote a story, and then I wrote another story. And in the book, in the writing group I was part of, there was one member that didn't really understand math, and the other one understood. So I said, you know what? I got to write it for everyone, so I got to clarify it. So I threw everything, and then I decided, let's break it down into 3 stories. How did we get there? How did we get to the 2008? How did this happen? So I called it the scheme. Then we have the collapse. And so I wrote a story from the point of view of an analyst for a hedge fund in New York. And the analyst looks at all this and says, something's bad gonna happen. And so the hedge fund owner, the man who is the director of the hedge fund, comes and says, that's not possible. And they argue, well, yes, look, well, maybe I'm wrong, the analyst says, maybe you're right. And then little by little, as it uncover, oh, this is what happened. The hedge fund manager realized, okay, this is catastrophic. And the next chapter, which I tried to put everything in one, was impossible. It's called The Aftermath. So this one, I wrote it almost as a kind of someone reflecting on what happened. Well, what happened is the bank got richer during Obama. I don't know if you probably do remember. He was very upset because the bank gave bonus in the amount of 160 billion, something like this. And then if you write a check that bounced for a mother who had no money, she would go to jail. Nobody went to jail in this entire thing. I mean, scammers, they did get fines. I was talking to your husband. No, not your husband. No, not Vince. Vance. Yeah, no, I was talking to another gentleman, and his daughter was working at a Wells Fargo. And I said, well, I didn't say anything. And he said, well, it's not the best bank. I'm like, I'm glad you said it's not me. They're the worst, absolute. And so I go through the documenting what happened. For instance, there was something called hemp, the home something. So you bought a house, you can't really afford it. Obama put in place a system where the bank could come. The bank get a fee for the application. And what they did with the application? But they took all the money. And so these people were like, I put my application, I'm waiting, what's going on? And so they got fined. Bank of America was fined 12 billion, but they made so much money. They were, I'm sure you remember, they had people signing, The first story, the scheme I call is it's called originator. An originator in a bank, in a mortgage, the person that, gives you the mortgage. So I go to the bank and I say, well, I need a mortgage for my home. There's the originator. They sell it so it's these guys, they go there in San Diego and they're selling, and I'm sure you all remember Ninja Loan, Nona, no income, no asset, all this stuff. It was like, so the team leader is like, so this rule from the SEC, you're not supposed to be filling up. Well, we feel it. You're supposed to be filled. There's no, they speak Spanish. They don't know. Okay, $100,000 income, and all these loans got into crash. So this is a really nice story. It's very short, and my main character is an Iraqi immigrant, and there's the parallel between his flashing back to having lost his family and being in a Crown Victoria with 2 guys. It's a really good story. I liked it. I thought it was a nice way to tell a story and bring the human aspect to it. And then I finish the book with Monarchies in the 21st Century. And Monarchies in the 21st Century is basically a teacher that comes in the classroom and say, what trait, what qualities, what would a king need to survive? So he would need, so they say, oh, we would need money, and to do what? What, to buy things? No, not to buy things, to pay for an army, to pay for his police, to protect himself. And so I bring a few things in this story. One, the fact that we do want a police, we want laws, and all this is documented. I mean, I pick, so there was this woman who wanted to be a wealth manager, wealth fund, and she was like, there's two ways I can go about it. I can try to insert myself in this highly privileged society, or I can work for them. And so she works for them. And I mean, this is true. This is not me making it up. And she wrote a book. And she says, the laws don't apply to them. They fly into anywhere. There's no passport. There's none of that, And then, so I get the laws, a class system. And I have this conversation, and why would you have a class system? Because the class system actually is a way to oppress people. I'm sorry, but I don't want to get too political, but I'm French, so the class system is, we got to go with the class system. And if I were to ask you, what are the classes that we have right now?
Lower class, middle class, upper class, billionaires.
So, and I think you're more correct, because if you say rich, middle class, and poor, what is rich? And I mean, I have friends that are very wealthy. They're like, they're like, well, we're not that wealthy compared to them. And then this guy's like, well, I'm not compared to them, I mean, the House of Saud, the Saudi, the control of the king, they're worth around 2 trillion, okay? The Rothschild, because the Rothschilds are very, very good with secrecy, that's what made them. They were like the shadows. The family, you can never tell, but I think they were around 1.5 trillion to 2 trillion. That's their worth. We always say, oh, Musk is rich. Bezos. I'm sorry, Bezos actually is very good for me, because when I call and I buy something, next day it's on my door, I don't mind paying. If he makes money, good for him, He failed repeatedly, he failed. But hey, whatever, he worked like a dog, and I don't have any problem with that. But like we got to take a reality. Also, if you think of who are the shareholders of the central bank that is controlling us, you will not figure that. I bought a book from this gentleman who wrote about it, and he said he asked the government, can you tell me who are the shareholders? And they said, no, this is a secret. We can't tell you. And you're like, we're getting screwed. And so this is the way I end my book, and I have acknowledgement to thank all the people who helped me. So.
What's the role of cryptocurrency now?
Well, cryptocurrency is not there yet, but we will move. Like, for instance, France, you're not going to have any cash anymore.
What? Why?
They want to control, I mean, this is the future. I mean, if you think about it, so Facebook, the guy who runs Facebook, Zuckerberg, is building a center for data center that is bigger than New York City for super intelligence. And you're like, this is crazy. So, we're in a different world. But any question? The crypto, I think, is just money. So right now there's a fight between the old school, the people who run the central bank with currency and money because they have free reign, and the crypto and the crypto is very tricky because you can't really untraceable. Yeah, but it's also weird because you have data mining crypto and you're like, what? I'm gonna dig here and find some crypto or currency? No, that doesn't make sense. So anyway, I don't want to hold you too long. Any questions? No. If you are interested, I just finished my second book, and it's a book on dark pools.
What? Dark what?
Yes. And I don't want to make it too complicated, but basically what it is, I'm like, shocking, which period do you want? Now? Okay. So right now, okay, there are something called alternative trading exchange. So there no regulation. You and I could, if we had that much money, we could join a dark pool and trade. Those trades remain anonymous. You're a number, you don't have a name. So Putin, his money is in dark pools. Why not? Nobody knows. And just think of this. So you and I trade on the stock market, okay? We go, we look, it goes up, it goes down, okay? There is this entire exchange behind the scene that's going up and down, and they release the trades whenever they want. And the last tidbit I'm going to give you is, in January of this year, 40 to 50% of all trade happen in alternative trading system. That means, why are the 1% becoming richer and richer and richer? Well, they can do whatever they want. Nobody's going
But do they
stop.
interchange between the two?
So they are somewhat obliged to, inform that the trade was happening. But there's so much happening that we don't know. I mean, everything,
It's
if you
not
remember.
that they're crossing each other.
No, they're two parallel. Okay, and if you're interested in this, the story is very different. It's not as involved. It's one story, a bunch of characters, and a government. It's kind of a thriller. It's very nice. I really enjoyed writing that one. But anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.